Coming up, we hear from national and local leaders who are supporting water rights and unhoused Native people. Plus, we're taking you behind the scenes on the second anniversary of the launch of this broadcast. I'm Patty Tholahungva. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Tholahungva. Aaliyah Chavez is off. In Virginia, after 350 years, one tribe is set to care for the land of its ancestors. The Rappahannock tribe received 465 acres of its ancestral homelands on the east side of the Rappahannock River. Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland announced the return of the land last week. It's part of a movement to respect and restore Indigenous place in the state. In 2016, the National Park Service purchased Chief Powhatan's former hometown, which was a seat of power and influence for his nation. Political consultant John Tasuda spoke to ICT about some of the Indigenous places he's visited in the state.
Those places out there are really, ecologically unique, and they have a great spirituality to them, sitting right on the river, and and you look out over the river, and it's still pretty heavily wooded, and you get a real sense of what it must have looked like a few hundred years ago.
The Park Service acquired the former Powhatan town for inclusion into its Captain John Smith National Historic Trail. A Native nonprofit is working to build a center of healing and hope in a place full of controversy for the citizens of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Stuart Huntington has more on plans to transform the reservation border town of Whiteclay, Nebraska.
Liquor stores in Whiteclay used to sell more than 3.5 million cans of beer a year, mostly to residents of Pine Ridge. The town was the scene of nearly constant public intoxication and waves of police calls. It was to Tatewi Means, who runs Thunder Valley, symbolic of what alcohol has meant to Native communities for centuries.
It's been used as a tool and really weaponized against our people to acquire land as a means to control our people. Whiteclay was the epitome of that.
In 2017, after years of protests, the Nebraska authorities closed the liquor stores. In December, Thunder Valley purchased 48 acres south of town. The plan? Build a healing center.
We are writing a healing story for the Whiteclay community, but for Lakota people that have suffered so many years because of the alcohol sales in Whiteclay.
Means envisions addiction treatment centers, housing options, and a hub for all manner of services. The first step is to gather input from the tribe and the community, but one thing is certain, the operation will be steeped in Indigenous traditions.
This healing community will be very much rooted in our Lakota identity, our Lakota lifeways, so that our people, our community members have a chance to connect to who they are, to strengthen their cultural identity, and to make those spiritual connections that our people were always so strong and passionate about.
Which is something the community is hoping to see.
That would be great. It would be the best thing probably that's happened. If that's what happens, it would be a complete 180. The sooner the better.
In Whiteclay, Nebraska, Stuart Huntington for ICT.
This week marks the 2-year anniversary of the ICT Newscast. We launched on April 6, 2020. At first broadcasting on our website and social media, and then on the FNX network and PBS stations nationwide. We're going to take you behind the scenes to show you what it took to start this newscast in the middle of a pandemic. Here's a report from Vincent Schilling, our former editor and director. Esquili,
what a difference a year makes.
Esquili, yes.
1 year ago on April 6, 2020, the world, and of course Indian country, was swept up in the beginnings of the coronavirus pandemic. Indian country was disproportionately affected, and we at Indian Country Today wanted to create a way to share COVID statistics affecting Indian country. We were all working from our home computers and doing the best we could to report from our living rooms and bedrooms with our laptops, phones, and TV screens arranged in the best ways possible to deliver the news. Patty had laptops positioned on a table in her living room, sat next to her television. We projected Dean Seneca onto her TV.
We're going to have to do an edit. Oh, good thing we're not live.
Patty also connected to Zoom on a second laptop so she could hear and interact and change what was projected onto the TV. Jordan and I also joined the Zoom meeting, and I recorded from an office space in my bedroom.
Bring this down.
Oh, this is weird looking at myself.
I was watching, listening, recorded, and trying to keep track. I had a lot of editing to do in a short time. We were under pressure, and I realized soon enough what we placed on our own heads.
It's affecting Indian country, right?
1 year later, Indian Country Today has its own television studio. Patty doesn't write notes on a whiteboard. We have a teleprompter, a studio, and staff to edit, record, work the cameras and lights. We've come a long way, and we still want to grow. Happy anniversary newscast. It's been a wild and bumpy ride.
And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, we'll find out how one organization is serving the large Native population living in Minneapolis. But first, we visit with Cheryl Giles from the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center to hear about her career in public service. Jarrah Giles is the chairwoman of the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. She tells us how her career of service to her community began.
What first got me started, of course, working for my own tribal nation and then just Indian country as a whole is really what my tribe has done for me as a student, as a young mother. I was a teenage mom. And so having those opportunities given to me to be able to continue my schooling, for my family to be housed, do housing programs, it was just one way for me to give back. And at 16, I had my first daughter, and she was born with Down syndrome. And so that trajectory of my life of giving back and really trying to find my purpose and make sure that she has a place in this world, it was just really drove me to just continue to do what I can, even with challenging circumstances sometimes.
Giles also mentioned how her career in social work began to open her eyes.
As a teenage mom, I was really focused on it, not knowing that she was going to have Down syndrome. Was really trying to set up I was still in high school, so I taking all the classes. I was really wanting to be a physical therapist, and started taking my math and sciences. And somewhere midstream, before my daughter was born, it was just like, this isn't who I am. And social work really started to have a calling. And then after my daughter was born, having all the social workers that were helping me get access services for her. And people ask me, well, what does your tribe offer for people with special needs? What can you do? And it really started to open my eyes, like, what are tribal communities doing for people with special needs? And just get me thinking about a lot of different things. And again, as a teenage mom, all the support services I had in place. So going to school and pursuing that degree in social work, and still not exactly sure like what area I wanted to focus on, but saying there was such a need out there in Indian country and in our communities. You know, finding a job wasn't going to be hard. That's unfortunate. But at least I can come from my background and my tribal community and just continue to elevate those voices that aren't often heard. And so being a social worker it led me to a lot of different areas, from child welfare to running 12 tribal direct service programs for my own tribal nation.
When she was just 24, she was elected to her tribal council, and she explains what it was like to be the youngest person to be elected to serve.
Man, I was really brave. At that time, I really thought to myself, I can do this. I had a master's degree. I also had 3 kids at that point, and I was pregnant with my 4th child. And I just, at the time, just felt fearless. Like this wasn't something that was too far out of reach. This wasn't something that wasn't unreasonable. And at that time, for my tribal council, we're the 4th largest tribe in the United States, the Muscogee Creek Nation. it just felt like this is a way I can give back, but it also wasn't a full-time job. It didn't come with benefits. So I was getting an $800 a month stipend. So I still had to work full-time, attend my council meetings, be a part of active in my community. So being a working mom and a career woman and just, coming out of my master's program, it was a way to say, I can do all of these things and do them well. And the use of technology, cell phones were coming out more emails, more internet when I first got on council. So even opening those opportunities to say, I can still be accessible and take care of the things I need to take care of in my home, as well as for my tribal community and then my professional career as well.
Giles shares advice for those who want to give back to their community.
Just starting small, the world does seem like a big place, and things may seem out of our control and that we don't have any say or any voice, but just creating those opportunities. I always say this especially for young people, as adults, adult aged people, we got to help create those opportunities and get out of their, young people's way as well. I have adult aged children in their early 20s, and I know they're still finding their way, but I also have to be able to say, okay, here's some opportunities. Here's, have you considered this? Have you looked at this? And then the work that I'm doing in behavioral health and wellness is for Bureau operated funded schools. And so we're looking at ways to connect again through social media, through the ways that we're not able to travel and meet in person, but really continuing to share what young people are doing. We see this abundance of TikTok videos and these young influencers. So promoting them and sharing their information and showing and highlighting them what they're doing in their own tribal communities as well.
And that was Charah Giles from the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. Housing the unhoused. It's an issue that leaders are tackling everywhere. In Minneapolis, the American Indian Community Development Corporation provides key services to natives. Leading the effort is Mike Goezi, who is Ho-Chunk. He gives us an overview of the support they offer.
AICDC, as the short term, we do a number of things. You're correct. One thing we do is we run the county detox, the chemical withdrawal management center. We've been doing that for almost 20 years, and that is a 64-bed unit that provides withdrawal services for Hennepin County, which is the largest county in the state of Minnesota. And there we have 64 beds, and we try to do our best to make people an opportunity to get withdrawal from alcohol or other substances, and help them find a referral that makes sense for them in their next quest for a better life.
Goezi tells us more about the options they offer to unhoused natives.
In the last, ever since 2019, to the Wall of Forgotten Natives, AICDC has been working at how do we create more housing opportunities for folks, housing and service opportunities. In the last 3 years, we've created 3 different housing alternatives. One of them really focusing on folks with an alcohol dependency. 2 of them focusing on people that have an opioid problem, and we use a low barrier harm reduction model, and we also in the last couple of years have opened up a 50-bed shelter, which is a native specific shelter. We have 100% native staff, and we do our best to serve 100% native population in that. And it's a 50-bed facility, and we also have an overnight facility for people that just are still stuck in no place to go. And so we do our best to make every option available for folks to help them through some traumatic times.
The CEO talks about how the pandemic played a factor in their work.
AICDC is kind of a different animal in that regard. We have 24-hour services. And so the detox is 24 hours, our housing is 24 hours. And so we did not lay anybody off over the course of the pandemic. We just didn't have that option. We needed people to be in their place, serving the population. We worked with the state of Minnesota Department of Health in creating some really standards in how to work with homeless folks. within the pandemic and people that live in community housing, because a lot of our housing is community based. And so we really decided early to really take their expertise and work within our program. And that really helped us to really mitigate a lot of transmission of COVID and the variants. And so we've been very successful, and really the state and actually the CDC has used some of the programs we have as a standard of how to address the COVID and the pandemic. We grew over the time of the pandemic. We added housing, we added services. Our outreach team was increased, and so over the course of 3 years, a lot of the agencies chose to huddle and keep what they had. AICDC felt it was important to do to look outside and see what more we could do to help the people.
And that was Mike Goezi in Minneapolis. Now we turn to water issues. The chair of the House Subcommittee on Indigenous Peoples is Theresa LedgerFernandez. She tells us how President Joe Biden's massive infrastructure law will help Navajo communities with water issues.
So that's the Navajo Gallup water supply project. And we hope that they will receive sufficient money to basically complete the project. And the project it's fully authorized now. So it was authorized. And as everybody knows, you can authorize a project in Congress, but you really can't get it in the ground and water flowing until you appropriate the money. So we appropriated full funding for it. We do know that there will still be the need for additional funding because of cost overruns, but boy, we're going to be able to build the laterals that will take it to the various chapter houses and communities, and that will really get it done. We were able to secure about $63 million that I was able to get through my community supported projects for it. And then that will be in addition to the full funding that we received in the infrastructure bill. So that's the great thing, is what we're doing now is we're putting together the infrastructure bill with the omnibus, with the community supported projects. And that's how you get creative and make sure we're taking water to all of those deserving Navajo homes and Gallup residents. It's not just for Navajo, it's also good for all of the communities along the way.
LedgerFernandez talks about the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act.
I was relieved because we know that Native women, Indigenous women are really, they're prey. And when tribes do not have jurisdiction over non-Indians to prosecute those who persecute, right, that they make them prey, right? It's like it's open season. It's horrible. And we needed to make sure we got that jurisdiction back. We needed to make sure we got the funding back so that we could do the kind of outreach that we needed. And what I also like is the fact that states like New Mexico, we're setting up a task force that will help with missing and murdered Indigenous women, that will be able to work in cooperation and collaboration with the federal funds and with tribes, because that's what we need, is we need everybody to recognize that this is a crisis, and this is a crisis that we can solve if we decide it is a priority. And what you saw in the omnibus bill is we decided it was a priority. We got VAWA, we authorized.
That was U.S. Representative Theresa LedgerFernandez. Well, leave it to technology to find its way into teaching native languages. An app for emojis made especially for Chickasaw people is now available. It features about 40 words and phrases, and one Chickasaw mother in Phoenix is already enjoying the new app.
Hi, I'm Lana Barrett. My tribe is Chickasaw from Oklahoma. My mom was born in 1932. She went to boarding school there in Oklahoma. She didn't speak English until she was 5 years old. And she was a fluent speaker. And as we grew up, though, she did not teach us the language. She taught us some words here and there. So here's the app. So far, I'm using it with my children and sending the text to them with the emojis. They were impressed with me and the fact that I could download the app. And second of all, they were impressed that we even have an app to be able to speak our language together and share this together. So if you want to know what the meanings are, you just click on this line up here, and then it goes through all the different symbols and the emojis. Here is CPL, Chapisa Lacho, meaning I will see you or will be seeing you. The language is so important to our culture and our tribes, right? For all Native Americans. But I think the interesting thing is that now we're trying to start to figure out ways of being able to use modern technology to be able to get the younger generation to understand the language and to be able to comprehend it more.
Tribal leader Greg Saris has a new book that was just published. It's called Becoming Story. He's the chairman of the Federated Indians of Granton Rancheria, and he tells us more about one of its major themes.
Well, I think it's been billed much as a memoir, and it's a memoir in essays, but it's essays about place, the way I negotiate place here. And I think more and more, always American Indian literature, but what distinguishes us so often is that we write from a place. We are people from a place rather than people who've come to a place. And I think that my memoir is a way to dialogue with the thousands of years of history, including today and the future of the place where I was born and where my ancestors are from. So it's an attempt to get a broad perspective of place.
Saris spoke more on Indigenous peoples' connection to place.
If you don't know and you're not familiar with place and you don't establish some kind of relationship with it, how are you going to feel a responsibility for it? And once we know it, as we have been here for time immemorial in our Aboriginal places, our Aboriginal landscapes, we have learned how important to respect and be responsible for the place we live in. Today, with mobile cultures, mobile ways of life, we pass the trees by, we pass the rocks, the mountains by. We're not connected and don't know the ways in which we need to be responsible. More than ever, there is that need. One of my great aunts, my ancestors, said in the 50s, 1950s, all you kids are leaving all the things we're teaching on the ground like clothes scattered about. She said, one day, the white people are going to be coming back to us and saying, how do we live here? What do we do? And she said, don't forget these things because they'll be looking to us for ways to survive, which of course is happening today.
Chairman Saris added his thoughts about all the new shows featuring Native stories and characters.
Well, there's many ways to read that, but positive in the broader scope of a lot of the, as a result of civil rights and social justice and those kinds of things. Luckily, the media is feeling more and more a responsibility to do the things that you have been doing for a long time, the broader media. But a more cynical read is that many people are interested. They especially when it comes to American Indian literature and thought, is more and more they realize they have to pay attention to us. They need to pay attention to us. And of course, we've always done, we'll take the high road and do what we can.
One name that comes up often in his book is Mabel McKay. He says she had a huge influence on him.
Everything that is important in my life. That woman, she was a renowned basket weaver, a medicine woman, and really kind of an appendage, if you will, to the old way of thinking, the ancient way. She was the last of our sucking doctors and dreamers and prophets out here in this area here. And as I like to say, she had more wisdom. She had hardly a second grade education, but she had more wisdom in her little finger than all the professors I knew at Stanford put together. And she taught me, again, that, and it saved my life in so many ways, Mark. She taught me early on that there was always something bigger than me, that the world was always bigger. And she told me early on that, with all the difficult things that have happened to me or whatever, you still have two choices, just as she did. You could become hateful and poison yourself or poison other people, or you can use what's happened to doctor and heal others. She said, you've already got hate, try the other. And the best moments of my life, I've tried the other, to share the stories, to do what I can as a teacher, as a tribal leader. She told me when I was 19 years old, she pinned a prayer basket on me. And she said, and I was a pretty wild kid. And she said to me, you're going to be a leader among the people. This is to protect you. And I thought, oh yeah, old lady, and the sun's going to come up on the west. Well, maybe she fixed me or did whatever, hoodooed me, but 30 years as a tribal chairman. So.
Here's a look now at the official book trailer for Becoming Story.
Winter. Renowned pomo basket weaver and Dr. Mabel McKay, who I was fortunate to have known, explained the rules about the ancient time stories. Only tell them in winter, after the first frost and before the last frost. Fall. Mabel McKay used to say, "It is a prayerful time. Pay attention because you are taking from the earth what you will need to live on during the winter." I imagine my ancestors hereabouts in this autumn twilight. Men and women sort through a cache of acorns spilled on the ground. Their faces and the rich designs in the upturned burden baskets flicker in the firelight. This is fall. Each story that rises from the landscape takes on its purple hue as far as I can see. The sky, like an upturned basket, reaches to the horizons. At this moment, I could turn it upright and carry it off.
And that will do it for us today. For more news, visit Indian Country Today. From all of us at ICT, have a great weekend. And remember, take care of yourselves. Your life is precious. I'm Patty Thalahungva. Join us again on Monday.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.